Whatever happened to Sylvanus? Well, for most guards, tier list placements have been an up and down roller coaster. For Sylvanus it has been a straight downhill race. In Season 1, shortly after its release, Sylvanus was picked or banned in every single game of the Smite World Championship finals. In Season 2, however, he was only picked once during the whole SWC, and in that game he lost. Over the last few months, Grover has probably seen more play in Paladins than Sylvanus has in Smite. So how did this happen? In the beginning, Sylvanus was just a little bit crazy. His wisps healed for more health, and they had a lower cooldown. Additionally, his basic attacks had a longer range. All of this was already nerfed in Season 1, and he was still extremely strong. With the introduction of Season 2, we saw the release of a purple buff, which also helped Sylvanus because typically Sylvanus would pick up the purple buff and then clear the wave. This was possible and extremely easy for him because back then his basic attacks had a knockback. This meant that he could just push the archers towards the brute minions and then hit the entire wave with his basic attacks. Sylvanus' first big nerf in Season 2 was in February. His wisps now only affected guards. Before, they also affected minions, meaning he could heal his own minions and damage enemy minions. This gave him insane lane pressure, but it's not like his lane pressure was weak afterwards. In May, the knockback from Sylvanus' basic attacks was removed. It was debated for a while if it was still worth for him to pick up the purple buff, but most of the time it was still picked up by Sylvanus, simply because he still had an AoE basic attack and could clear much faster than other guardians that way. The last nerf in Season 2 was in August, where Sylvanus' passive was changed, so it no longer procced on ranged attacks, but only melee basic attacks, meaning there was no chance for a ranged attacker to get rooted while attacking Sylvanus. This was the point where Sylvanus ultimately started to get stomped into the ground. Before that, he was still a decent pick and was picked and banned alongside with Athena, for example. After these nerfs, especially Gap showed up more, and Capri, who got released, also had a lot more potential. Meta shifts also helped bring Sylvanus down. This is transitioning from Season 2 to Season 3. For example, Sylvanus was always one of the guardians with the highest early lane pressure simply due to his AoE basic attack. However, dominating in lane didn't always have the same value. Back when mid-huppies still spawned at different times, it made much more sense for the support to get pressure early in order to rotate out. Gold Furies were also worth more at certain points, so it made more sense to bully the opponent out of lane to go for an early Gold Fury. With those rewards not just being as great anymore, it's not as good to have early pressure compared to having more late game potential, which Sylvanus has relatively little of. In the end, the supports that were picked at the Season 2 Smite World Championship were mostly supports that had some kind of way of getting out of problematic situations. Namely Capri, Athena, Gap and Sobek, and also Xingqian, even though he was mostly not played in support. If you think that Sylvanus was in a bad spot at that time, enter Season 3. Season 3 basically only brought changes that made the situation worse for Sylvanus. The only buff he received at the start was a slight cooldown reduction to Nature's Grasp that didn't really have an impact. In return, the purple buff was removed, meaning Sylvanus had even less early lane pressure, and the relic system was introduced. The relic system was not very helpful for Sylvanus because he was one of those supports who relied on getting 2 actives relatively early into the game. Often these actives would be Blink and Sprint. Blink to get a good engage with his ultimate similar to Gap, and Sprint to be able to get out of situations. With you only being able to get your second active at level 12, this was a problem for Sylvanus. At the same time, other supports could get Curse at its fullest potential at level 1 in order to lock Sylvanus down and interrupt his healing and basically make him completely useless. On top of that, Golden Bow had a change in Season 3, which allowed ADCs to clear a lot better on their own. Lane pressure guardians didn't have as much of an impact anymore and weren't as relevant because the ADCs didn't really need them in order to clear. Therefore, supports that were more versatile and helped more throughout the whole game had a lot more potential than Sylvanus could, especially with Sylvanus being so easily locked down. Sylvanus then went on to receive another buff that once again reduced the cooldown of Nature's Grasp and slightly reduced the mana cost. Once again, it didn't really do much. In the most recent patch, in July, Sylvanus got another buff. The seed time of his verdant growth was drastically reduced. Instead of growing for 12 seconds, the seed would now grow for 5 seconds until it sprouted, meaning it would give you the full benefit of the MP5 after 5 seconds. The MP5, so mana per 5 seconds, was also increased from scaling up to 20 starting at 6 to just flat 20 at all ranks, meaning it is much less important to put points into verdant growth now, and Nature's Grasp can typically be leveled second instead. At this point, it's still unclear where this leaves Sylvanus. With Golden Bow removed, a little bit of his lane pressure dominance came back. Along with that, with his new MP5 from his verdant growth, it's very good for him to be your lane companion when you're a mana-hungry hunter, for example Ullr. Giving you that MP5 along with Transcendence means you can spam your abilities all game long. It's great overall, but it's the question if it's enough to make Sylvanus viable. He is still easily countered by Curse, he is still very immobile and suffers from the problem with the second relic only being available at level 12. Gold Fury is not worth as much, and he's typically not there to contest the first mid-harpies. In the end, we'll have to see where Sylvanus goes in the future. He has been one of the lowest tier supports for quite a while now. He might see a little bit of a rise now, but he will probably still not be close to the top. That concludes this video. Thank you guys for watching. Duke Sloth, out.